The night air cut like a knife, 17 degrees with a wind chill that made Boston's back alleys feel like the Arctic. Dr. Michael Thomas gripped his steering wheel tighter, his headlights carving a narrow path through the unfamiliar neighborhood. A wrong turn. That's all it had taken to bring him here. Then he saw it, a shadow moving against shadow. His foot hit the brake instinctively. The figure shifted again in the beam of his headlights. Not trash blown by wind. Not imagination. Something alive. When he opened his car door, the growl hit him first, low, warning, dangerous. A massive German shepherd, hackles raised, teeth bared, its dark eyes reflecting his flashlight with an almost supernatural intensity. But it wasn't the dog that stopped Michael's heart cold. It was the tiny, weakening cry coming from beneath the animal's protective stance. A sound he recognized instantly from years in pediatrics. A newborn baby, wrapped in nothing but a thin blanket, lay sheltered between the dog's legs. And in that moment, as flakes of snow began to fall, Michael realized both lives hung by the thinnest thread imaginable against the killing cold. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. Dr. Michael Thomas hadn't always been a night shift doctor at Boston Memorial. 3 years ago, he'd had everything: a thriving private practice, a beautiful wife named Amanda, and the promise of their first child on the way. Then came the icy bridge, the truck that couldn't stop, and the funeral where he stood alone as they lowered 2 coffins instead of none. After 6 months of barely functioning, he'd thrown himself into the demanding emergency pediatric department, working the hours nobody wanted, treating the children who reminded him of what he'd lost. His colleagues respected his skill but whispered about the hollowness behind his eyes, the man who performed medical miracles but never smiled. At 38, Michael had built walls so high around his heart that no one had glimpsed over them in years, until tonight. The German shepherd had no official name tag when Michael found her, but the hospital staff quickly christened her guardian. Unknown to them, she answered to Star, a name given by her owner reflecting the white star-shaped patch on her chest. The dog's history was written in scars across her powerful body. She had once been a search and rescue dog trained to find survivors after disasters. During her last mission, she had failed to reach a trapped child in time after a building collapse. The trauma had left her with a form of canine PTSD that made her unsuitable for further rescue work. Rehabilitation seemed impossible until Sarah Mitchell adopted her from a shelter scheduled to euthanize the traumatized animal. Under Sarah's gentle care, Star had slowly healed, transferring all her protective instincts to her new owner, and eventually to Sarah's newborn baby. Sarah Mitchell's downward spiral began when Boston City Hospital downsized its pediatric unit, eliminating her nursing position. At 26, with no family support and abandoned by her baby's father when she told him she was pregnant, Sarah had depleted her savings just to survive the pregnancy. Postpartum depression hit her hard after delivery, darkening already desperate circumstances. What nobody knew, not even Sarah herself, was that she had been adopted as an infant. The brother she never knew she had worked just 3 miles away at a competing hospital. Her decision to abandon her 2-week-old daughter came after days without food, an eviction notice, and hours of uncontrollable tears. But she couldn't bear to leave her child completely unprotected in the freezing February night. Dr. Michael Thomas's 12-hour shift had drained him completely. 3 cases of severe flu, a broken arm, and a particularly distressing case of suspected child abuse had left him emotionally depleted. The digital clock on his dashboard read 2:17 a.m. as he pulled out of the hospital parking garage. Snow had begun falling an hour earlier, and the plows hadn't yet cleared the secondary roads. Normally he would take the direct route home to his empty apartment in Beacon Hill, a path he could navigate in his sleep after 3 years of late shifts. Tonight, however, a jackknife tractor-trailer had closed the main thoroughfare, forcing him to rely on his car's navigation system to find an alternate route. Rerouting, the mechanical voice announced, directing him toward neighborhoods he rarely visited. The streets narrowed as he drove, elegant brownstones giving way to more modest dwellings, and finally to blocks of apartments clearly struggling against urban decay. Michael rubbed his tired eyes, focusing on the road as the navigation system led him deeper into unfamiliar territory. The streetlights here were fewer, casting irregular pools of yellow light on grimy snow. His headlights caught occasional movement, a stray cat, someone huddled in a doorway seeking shelter from the bitter cold. Boston's overlooked citizens, invisible to most who worked in the gleaming hospitals and financial towers. A sudden flash of movement caught his attention, something larger than a cat darting between parked cars. His brain, trained through years of emergency medicine to catch subtle signs, registered that the movement wasn't random, it had purpose. Michael slowed the car, peering through the windshield as snow collected on the glass. There was again a dark shape moving deliberately in an alley between two buildings. He should keep driving. He knew that. This wasn't his neighborhood, it was late, and he was exhausted. But something about the movement struck him as desperate. He pulled to the curb, leaving the headlights on to illuminate the alley entrance. "Hello?" he called, stepping cautiously from his vehicle. The bitter cold hit him immediately, stealing his breath. The snow fell more heavily now, accumulating on his dark wool coat. Michael reached back into his car for the heavy-duty flashlight he kept for emergencies, then closed the door, locking it with a beep that sounded unnaturally loud in the night silence. As he approached the alley, his flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing nothing at first but scattered trash and the brick walls of adjacent buildings. Then he heard a low, rumbling growl that raised the hair on his neck. The beam found the source, a large German shepherd standing rigid, teeth bared in warning. The dog's fur was matted in places, but it was clearly not a stray too well-muscled, too alert. It stood in a protective stance, feet planted firmly as though guarding something. The growl intensified as Michael took another step forward. Then, almost imperceptible beneath the dog's warning, came another sound that instantly activated every medical instinct in his body, the faint cry of an infant. "My God," Michael whispered, his breath forming clouds in the freezing air. He swept the flashlight beam lower, and there, nestled beneath the dog's body, partially protected from snow by the animal's warmth, lay a bundle wrapped in a light blue blanket. A tiny hand had worked free of the wrapping, fingers blue-tinged in the flashlight's glow. Michael's training took over. "Easy," he said softly to the dog, slowly kneeling while maintaining distance. "I'm not going to hurt anyone. I'm a doctor." The words were meaningless to the animal, but his tone seemed to register. The growling continued, but didn't escalate. Michael could now see that the dog had positioned itself to block the wind from reaching the baby, its body creating a windbreak while providing life-saving warmth. "I need to check the baby," he said, keeping his voice low and even. "That child needs medical attention immediately." He inched forward on his knees, snow soaking through his pants. The dog's growl became a snarl, lips pulling back to reveal intimidating canines. The message was clear: come no closer. Michael retreated slightly, mind racing. The baby's cry had weakened a dangerous sign. Hypothermia could kill an infant within hours in these temperatures, and he had no idea how long the child had been outside. He needed to act, but one wrong move might provoke the dog to attack. He reached slowly for his phone, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening. "This is Dr. Michael Thomas from Boston Memorial. I found an abandoned infant in an alley off Dorchester Avenue with a dog guarding it. I need police and ambulance immediately. The baby appears to be suffering from exposure." He gave the cross streets as best he could identify them, then added, "and send animal control. There's a German shepherd protecting the baby, seems highly aggressive toward anyone approaching." While waiting, Michael tried again to reach the infant. "Please," he said to the dog, knowing it was irrational to plead with an animal, but desperate to help the baby. "That child will die without medical attention." He moved forward again, but this time the dog lunged slightly, snapping at the air between them, a final warning. Michael jerked back, nearly falling in the snow. The wail of approaching sirens cut through the night. The dog's ears perked up, and its posture became even more defensive. Michael feared the animal might flee with the baby or become more aggressive when strangers arrived. "Help is coming," he told the dog as though it could understand. "Please, just let us help." The ambulance arrived first, its red lights painting the snow-covered alley in crimson pulses. Two paramedics approached cautiously after Michael warned them about the dog. They assessed the situation quickly, one returning to the ambulance for thermal blankets while the other conferred with Michael. "That baby can't wait," the paramedic said grimly. "The temperature's dropping, and if it's a newborn." The police arrived next, followed shortly by animal control. A female officer approached, moving with incredible slowness, talking in a soothing voice. "Hey there, big guy, nobody's going to hurt you." The dog's attention split between the multiple threats now surrounding it, but it remained steadfast over the baby. The animal control officer prepared a snare pole, but Michael intervened. "Wait, that dog isn't being aggressive out of meanness. It's protecting the baby. It could have abandoned the child, or even worse. Instead, it's been keeping that infant alive." Minutes stretched agonizingly as they tried different approaches. The baby's cries grew fainter, adding urgency to an already tense situation. Finally, Michael had an idea. He asked the paramedics for one of the thermal blankets, then knelt again, this time remaining farther from the dog. "Look," he said softly, spreading the silver thermal blanket where the dog could see it. "This will warm the baby better than you can. It's what the baby needs now." He placed the blanket on the ground and backed away. To everyone's surprise, the dog's demeanor changed subtly. It looked from the blanket to the baby, then back at Michael. Some primitive understanding seemed to pass between man and animal. Both wanted the same thing, the child's survival. With excruciating slowness, the dog relaxed its protective stance, allowing Michael to approach with the thermal blanket. As he wrapped the fragile infant, the dog watched intently, growling softly but making no move to interfere. "Unbelievable," the animal control officer whispered. "It's like it understands." Once the baby was secured and being transferred to the ambulance, the dog tried to follow. When the animal control officer moved to capture it, Michael made a split-second decision. "The dog comes too," he said firmly. "It saved this child's life tonight." The ambulance sliced through Boston's snow-laden streets, siren wailing as it carried its unusual trio, a critically cold infant, a doctor refusing to relinquish his tiny patient, and a German shepherd that had somehow negotiated its way into emergency transport. Dr. Michael Thomas worked methodically in the cramped space, his hands stabilizing the infant's temperature while monitoring vital signs. The paramedics had initially protested the dog's presence. But something in Michael's voice, perhaps the authority of a man who had seen too much death, already silenced their objections. The dog sat perfectly still in the corner of the ambulance, eyes never leaving the bundle in Michael's hands. "Female, approximately 2 weeks old," Michael reported as they burst through the emergency doors of Boston Memorial. "Severe hypothermia, pulse weak but stable, signs of dehydration." His colleagues moved with practiced efficiency, whisking the infant to the pediatric emergency unit. When a security guard moved to intercept the German shepherd padding determinedly behind the gurney, Michael intervened. "The dog stays within visual range of the baby. I'll take responsibility." Later he would question this inexplicable decision, but in that moment it felt absolutely non-negotiable. Dr. Rachel Cohen, the hospital director working the night shift, appeared as they transferred the baby to a warming station. "Michael, what on earth?" she began, eyeing the large dog. "Rachel, this animal kept that infant alive," Michael explained quickly, his voice leaving no room for debate. "It could have wandered off, or worse. Instead, it used its body heat to prevent fatal hypothermia. I've never seen anything like it." Rachel, a pragmatic woman who had worked with Michael long enough to trust his judgment, simply nodded. "Keep it out of the direct treatment area, and find someone from veterinary to check it over." Within minutes, the hospital's organized chaos enveloped the infant. Warming measures, IV fluids, careful monitoring, every intervention designed to reverse the dangerous cold that had nearly claimed such a new life. Through it all, the dog maintained a silent vigil from the corner of the room, permitted there only after Michael's insistence and a quick examination by an on-call veterinarian who pronounced the animal healthy but dehydrated. As dawn broke over Boston, the baby's condition stabilized. "She's responding well," Dr. Cohen noted, reviewing the latest vitals. Another hour out there, she left the sentence unfinished, both doctors knowing exactly what would have happened without intervention. Michael nodded, rubbing his face with hands that showed the faintest tremor, the adrenaline of the night finally wearing off. The infant now lay in a specialized warmer, pink returning to her previously blue-tinged extremities. A nurse had cleaned her, revealing wispy blonde hair and delicate features that reminded Michael painfully of the ultrasound images of his own daughter, images he had tucked away in a drawer he rarely opened. The dog, which staff had begun calling Guardian, exhibited behavior that fascinated the hospital personnel. When moved to a corner with water and food, the animal ate quickly, then returned to its position closest to the baby's room. When a new nurse entered the room, Guardian would rise, alert and watchful, until Michael or someone she recognized assured her with a word or gesture. Most remarkably, when the baby cried, Guardian would become visibly distressed, whining softly and looking toward the staff, as if demanding they attend to the infant immediately. "I've never seen anything like it," whispered one nurse to another. "It's like the dog thinks the baby is hers." By mid-morning, the extraordinary story had traveled through the hospital staff. A security guard leaked a photo of Guardian keeping watch, and by noon, local news outlets picked up the story, "Hero Dog Protects Abandoned Newborn." The first reporter arrived at Boston Memorial by early afternoon, requesting statements about the miracle dog and baby. Doctor. Cohen intercepted the media inquiries, issuing a brief statement confirming only that an infant found abandoned was in stable condition and the dog that had been protecting her remained at the hospital. By evening, news vans lined the hospital entrance. The story had struck a powerful chord: abandoned innocence, animal heroism, the cruelty of leaving a child in deadly winter conditions. Social media exploded with the still-developing tale. Who could leave their baby to die? Read one viral post. "That dog is better than the baby's own mother," declared another. A hospital volunteer started a crowdfunding page for Guardian, raising thousands within hours for the dog's future needs and care. As night fell again, Michael found himself unable to leave the hospital despite having been awake for nearly 36 hours. He sat in a chair near the baby's room, Guardian resting at his feet. Detective Eleanor Jenkins from Boston PD appeared, notebook in hand. "Dr. Thomas, I understand you're the one who found the infant." Her questions were thorough, professional. Had he noticed anyone in the area? Any identifying information on the baby's blanket? Michael provided what little he knew, concluding with an observation that puzzled him still. The dog wasn't just near the baby by coincidence. It was actively protecting her, using its body to block the wind and provide warmth. That took intelligence, purpose. Detective Jenkins nodded thoughtfully. "We're checking area cameras, asking for witnesses. Someone must have seen something. A dog and a baby don't just appear in an alley." She hesitated before adding, "In these cases, the parent often abandons the baby somewhere they believe it will be found quickly. Churches, hospitals, fire stations. Not alleys in snowstorms with only a dog as protection." The implication hung heavily between them. This hadn't been an act of desperate hope, or had it? The detective left, promising updates as the investigation progressed. Michael remained in his chair, suddenly confronting a moral complexity he hadn't anticipated. His initial rage at the unknown parent who could abandon their child had been absolute. Now, looking at Guardian's unwavering devotion, a new question formed. What kind of person leaves their baby with their dog as protector? Someone cruel and callous? Or someone desperate beyond reasoning who trusted their beloved pet more than the human systems that might have failed them? His musings were interrupted by a social worker who arrived with preliminary paperwork. Margaret Winters introduced herself with a brisk handshake, her expression severe beneath steel-gray hair. "I've been assigned to baby Jane Doe's case." she explained, using the temporary designation for the unidentified infant. Once she's medically cleared, she'll be placed in emergency foster care pending investigation. Michael felt an unexpected tightness in his chest at these words. "Ms." Winters continued, her tone leaving no room for sentiment. "The dog, of course, will go to Animal Services. Though given the publicity, I expect adoption offers will be plentiful." Michael found himself saying, "The dog stays with the baby." Ms. Winters raised an eyebrow. "That's not how the system works, Dr. Thomas. Children's Services and Animal Control are entirely separate entities." Something shifted in Michael, then a certainty he couldn't explain. Born perhaps from watching Guardian's unwavering protection, or from the memory of holding that tiny life as warmth gradually returned to it. "Then the system is wrong in this case," he said quietly. "That dog kept this child alive. Breaking that bond now would be another trauma for an infant who's already survived abandonment." Ms. Winters regarded him coolly. "Are you a child psychology expert now, Doctor?" Michael met her gaze without flinching. "No, but I know that something exceptional happened in that alley, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise for bureaucratic convenience." As the words left his mouth, Michael realized he had just committed himself to a battle he hadn't planned to fight, one that would ultimately change everything. The investigation into the abandoned infant's origins began in earnest the following morning. Detective Jenkins assembled a small team dedicated to the case, which had garnered significant public interest overnight. Officers canvassed the neighborhood where Dr. Thomas had found the baby, going door to door with photos of both the infant and the German Shepherd. Security camera footage from nearby businesses was collected, though the alley itself had no surveillance. The blanket wrapping the child, a simple blue cotton receiving blanket available at any department store, yielded no identifying characteristics. The clothing on the infant, a basic white onesie and knit cap, was similarly generic. Detective Jenkins stood before a bulletin board in the precinct, pinning a map showing where the baby was discovered. "Our time window is narrow," she told her team. "Based on the pediatrician's assessment, the infant wasn't outside more than 3 to 4 hours before discovery, or she wouldn't have survived. That puts abandonment between 10 p.m. and 1 a.m. during a snowstorm." A young officer raised his hand. "What about the dog? Pretty distinctive animal, someone must recognize it." Jenkins nodded. "We've distributed images to all veterinary clinics, shelters, and dog licensing offices within a 50-mile radius. The dog isn't microchipped, which is unusual for an animal of that quality and training. It suggests either negligent ownership or deliberate avoidance of identification." She didn't voice her emerging theory that whoever had abandoned the baby had intentionally removed means of tracing the dog back to them. The investigation continued through traditional channels, but social media had transformed the case in unprecedented ways. Guardian Dog and Boston Baby Angel were trending nationally. Amateur sleuths online analyzed every available detail, sometimes hampering official efforts with well-meaning but misguided tips. The reward for information leading to identification of the baby's parents had reached $25,000, funded by anonymous donors moved by the story. Despite the public attention and police efforts, 3 days passed without significant leads. While the police focused on finding the baby's parents, hospital staff contended with practical and ethical challenges. The infant, officially designated Baby Jane Doe but unofficially called Angel by nurses, continued to improve medically. The hypothermia had resolved without apparent complications, and tests showed normal organ function and neurological responses. Guardian remained a constant presence, permitted in Angel's room during the day under supervision, then kenneled overnight in a makeshift arrangement in an unused storage area nearby. The dog had developed a routine, watching vigilantly during medical procedures, resting when the baby slept, alerting staff with a soft whine when the infant woke before monitors detected changes. Dr. Cohen had defended this unusual accommodation to hospital administration, citing extraordinary circumstances and positive patient outcomes. Privately, she confessed to Michael, "I've never broken so many protocols in 30 years of medicine. But watching that dog with that baby, it just feels right." The inevitable clash with bureaucracy came on the fourth day. Margaret Winters arrived with 2 additional social workers and formal transfer papers. "The infant is medically cleared for discharge," she stated, her tone leaving no room for negotiation. "We've arranged emergency placement with a certified foster family specializing in newborn care." Michael, who had adjusted his shifts to remain involved in Angel's case, felt his chest tighten at the words. "And guardian?" he asked, already knowing the answer. MS. Winters' expression remained impassive. "The animal control will take custody today." As I mentioned previously, given the publicity, adoption should be straightforward. Michael looked through the window at Guardian, who lay curled protectively near Angel's bassinet. "They should stay together," he said quietly. MS. Winters sighed with thinly veiled impatience. "Dr. Thomas, I understand you formed an attachment, but the systems in place exist for good reasons. The dog, while remarkably well behaved, is still an animal with unknown history. We cannot place an unknown dog with a foster family caring for an infant." Dr. Cohen, who had joined them midway through the conversation, interjected. "What if there were an alternative?" Both Michael and MS. Winters turned to her with surprise. "I've consulted with our legal department. Given the exceptional nature of this case and the significant public interest, they believe we could petition for a special temporary arrangement." MS. Winters frowned. "What sort of arrangement?" Dr. Cohen glanced meaningfully at Michael before continuing. "A temporary joint custody arrangement for both the infant and the dog with a qualified caregiver, pending identification of the birth parents or permanent placement determination." The implication hung in the air for a moment before Michael understood. "Me?" he asked, genuinely shocked. "You're suggesting I take them?" "Both of them?" Dr. Cohen nodded slightly. "You're a pediatrician with emergency training. You found them. You've already established rapport with both. And most importantly, you seem to be the only one insisting they remain together." MS. Winters' opposition was immediate and vehement. "Absolutely not. Dr. Thomas has no certification as a foster parent. There are procedures, home studies, training requirements." Dr. Cohen raised a hand to interrupt, "all of which could be expedited or modified given the circumstances. Our legal team believes a judge might consider this an exceptional case warranting exceptional measures." A heated discussion ensued, with MS. Winters citing regulations and protocols, while Dr. Cohen countered with precedents for judicial discretion in unique cases. Michael remained silent, his mind racing with implications. Him caring for an infant? After everything that had happened? And a dog he knew nothing about? The very idea seemed impossible, perhaps even cruel, given his history. Yet something about separating Angel from the one constant presence in her short life felt equally wrong. While the debate over Angel and Guardian's future intensified behind hospital walls, public fascination with their story continued to grow. A local news station ran a feature titled "The Guardian Angel: When Animals Show More Humanity Than Humans," including interviews with animal behaviorists who explained the rarity of such protective behavior from a dog toward an unrelated human infant. Religious commentators saw divine intervention, while others pointed to the remarkable intelligence of canines. Rescue dog organizations reported surges in adoption applications. The hospital received dozens of offers to adopt both the baby and dog together, many from well-meaning but unprepared individuals moved by the emotional story. More concerning to Detective Jenkins were several large cash offers from wealthy individuals seeking to fast-track adoption, one as high as $250,000. "This isn't an auction," she told her superiors grimly. "But the publicity has created a circus atmosphere I don't like. The child's welfare could be compromised." 5 days after finding Angel and Guardian in the alley, Michael found himself standing in his apartment, surveying the space with new eyes. The minimalist decor and precision-organized rooms reflected the life he'd built after losing his family, functional, ordered, and emotionally barren. Nothing about it suggested warmth or nurturing. Yet here he was, measuring spaces for a crib and dog bed following his impulsive decision to petition for temporary guardianship. The legal proceedings had moved with surprising speed, facilitated by the hospital's influential legal team and a judge sympathetic to the unique circumstances. MS. Winters had fought vigorously against the arrangement, but was overruled when Michael's attorney presented expert testimony on the documented benefits of maintaining the bond between the infant and dog, particularly following trauma. The temporary guardianship was granted with stringent conditions: weekly home visits, mandatory parenting classes, and the understanding that the arrangement would terminate immediately upon identification of the birth parents. Michael methodically transformed his apartment, converting his rarely used home office into a nursery. He installed baby monitors, child-proofed cabinets, and purchased essential supplies with a pediatrician's precision, if not a parent's intuition. For Guardian, he bought premium dog food, a plush bed, and various toys recommended by the veterinarian who had examined her at the hospital. The dog's gentle temperament with the baby contrasted sharply with her wariness around strangers, a dichotomy that both impressed and concerned Michael. A professional dog trainer evaluated Guardian at his request, pronouncing her exceptionally well-trained but noting signs of previous trauma. "This dog has been through something significant," the trainer explained. "Her protective behavior toward the baby isn't random. She's been trained to protect, but there's something more here, a bond I can't fully explain." As the homecoming approached, Michael found himself waking from vivid dreams of Amanda, his deceased wife, alternately approving and questioning his decision to bring an abandoned baby into their once shared space. The day Angel and Guardian came home to Michael's apartment marked precisely 1 week since he had found them in the snow-covered alley. Dr. Cohen personally oversaw the discharge, bypassing standard protocols to escort them herself. "You're doing the right thing, Michael," she said quietly as they rode the elevator to his floor. "I can't explain why I'm so certain, but I am." Michael nodded, not trusting himself to speak. The weight of the infant carrier in his hand felt simultaneously foreign and strangely right. Guardian walked perfectly at heel beside him, her behavior so exemplary that Dr. Cohen commented, "That dog has had professional training worth thousands of dollars." Inside the apartment, Michael carefully settled Angel in her new crib, Guardian immediately taking position nearby. As Dr. Cohen departed with promises of check-in calls, Michael was struck by the silence suddenly filled with new presence, the soft breathing of the baby, the occasional shifting of the dog's weight. For the first time in 3 years, his home contained life beyond his own solitary existence. That evening, as Michael prepared Angel's bottle according to precisely researched instructions, his phone rang. Detective Jenkins spoke without preamble. "We may have a lead." Michael's hand stilled on the formula container. "A woman matching our age profile purchased newborn supplies at a pharmacy 3 blocks from where you found the baby. Security footage shows her with a German Shepherd." Michael glanced at Guardian, who had raised her head at his sudden tension. "You've identified her?" The detective's hesitation was brief but noticeable. "Not yet. The footage isn't clear enough for facial recognition. But we're canvassing with the images we have. I wanted you to know this could move quickly now." After hanging up, Michael stood motionless in his kitchen, confronting an uncomfortable truth. Part of him didn't want them to find Angel's mother. The thought shocked him with its selfishness. Wasn't that what all this effort was for? To reunite a child with her parent? Yet in just 1 week, the presence of this tiny human and her canine protector had awakened something in him he had thought permanently extinguished. The breaking news came 3 days later. "Woman surrenders in Boston Guardian dog baby case," the headlines declared. Michael learned the details not from official channels but from the incessant news alerts on his phone. Sarah Mitchell, 26, had turned herself in to Boston police, accompanied by an attorney. No photograph had been released, but reports indicated she had admitted to abandoning her newborn daughter with her dog. Public reaction was swift and merciless. Online comments demanded maximum prosecution. Talk radio hosts debated appropriate punishment. Protesters gathered outside the police station, their signs reading "Justice for Angel" and "No Mercy for Monster Mom." Michael found himself in an unexpected position, defending a woman he had never met, to colleagues who expressed outrage. We don't know her circumstances, he argued during a tense lunch conversation. The fact that she left her dog to protect the baby suggests she wasn't simply abandoning her child to die. His colleague's response was cutting. She left a newborn in freezing temperatures rather than seeking help. Nothing justifies that. As legal proceedings against Sarah Mitchell began, Michael received notice that he would likely be called to testify regarding his discovery of Angel and Guardian. The document included Sarah's booking photograph, a pale young woman with hollow cheeks and eyes displaying equal measures of fear and resignation. Something about her face nagged at Michael's subconscious, a strange sense of familiarity he couldn't place. He studied the photo repeatedly, finally concluding it must be the resemblance to Angel, though the baby's features were still too undeveloped for strong familial identification. Meanwhile, his temporary home had developed rhythms around infant care. Guardian proved an unexpected ally, alerting him to Angel's waking moments before cries began and remaining vigilantly nearby during baths and diaper changes. Michael found himself talking to both of them, explaining medical procedures to Angel as he checked her vital signs and discussing his day with Guardian during evening walks. Colleagues noticed changes in him, occasional smiles, family photos on his phone, a newfound willingness to engage in conversations beyond work. The inevitable meeting was arranged through Sarah's attorney, a supervised visit where Michael would bring Angel to the detention center where Sarah awaited trial. Guardian was excluded from this visit, despite Michael's objections. The corrections facility's sterile visitation room made an awkward setting for such an emotionally charged meeting. Sarah entered in detention clothing, wrists shackled despite her attorney's objections about such restraints during a mother-baby visit. Michael, holding Angel in a protective embrace, was struck again by that strange sense of recognition when looking at Sarah. Their introduction was awkward, formal, neither knowing quite how to navigate this unprecedented situation. "Thank you," Sarah said simply, her voice barely audible. "For finding them. For keeping them together." Michael nodded, searching for appropriate words and finding none. When he carefully transferred Angel to her mother's arms, the infant seemed to study Sarah's face with unusual intensity before nestling against her. Sarah's composure broke then, silent tears tracking down her cheeks as she held her daughter for the first time since that desperate night. "How is Star?" Sarah asked after several minutes of simply holding Angel. Michael's confusion must have shown on his face. "My dog," she clarified. "You've been calling her Guardian, I heard, but her name is Star, because of the white star on her chest." Michael described how well Star had adjusted to their temporary home arrangement, her continued protectiveness toward Angel, her intelligence and training. Sarah listened with visible relief. She was a search and rescue dog, she confirmed. After she couldn't work anymore, they were going to put her down. I couldn't let that happen. The conversation continued haltingly, both adults aware of the legal complexities surrounding them. As the visit concluded, Sarah reluctantly returned Angel to Michael's arms. "I never wanted to leave her," she whispered. "You have to believe that. I just couldn't see any other way that night." Michael found himself nodding. The judgment he had initially felt now complicated by the evident love this woman had for her child, a love expressed in the most desperate and contradictory of actions. Sarah Mitchell's surrender to authorities created an immediate media frenzy that transformed the already compelling story into a national sensation. News outlets camped outside the courthouse, their satellite trucks forming a technological barricade. The district attorney, recognizing the high-profile nature of the case, personally announced the charges: child endangerment, child abandonment, and reckless conduct, collectively carrying a potential sentence of up to 15 years. The severity of the charges sparked immediate public debate. Conservative commentators demanded justice for the abandoned infant, while others questioned whether prosecution would address the underlying social issues that might drive a mother to such desperate measures. Sarah's public defender, Eleanor Matthews, granted a single interview in which she stated firmly, "This case is not as simple as the headlines suggest. My client made a difficult choice in impossible circumstances. We intend to present the full context to the court." Detective Jenkins arrived at Michael's apartment the evening after Sarah's surrender, her visit unofficial. "I thought you should hear the details directly," she explained, accepting the coffee Michael offered. Sarah Mitchell was a pediatric nurse at Boston City until downsizing last year. No criminal record. No history with Child Protective Services. She's been living on unemployment, which ran out 2 months ago. Michael listened intently, bouncing Angel gently as the infant fussed. She claimed she had no family support, no friends she could turn to. The baby's father denied paternity and blocked her number when she told him about the pregnancy. The detective sighed, watching as Star moved to position herself protectively near Angel. Here's what she told us that night: she had no heat in her apartment, no food, and had just received an eviction notice. She said she had a mental breakdown and concluded her baby would be better off without her. Michael's medical training allowed him to recognize the classic signs of postpartum depression compounded by extreme stress. So she left her with Star, he concluded quietly. "That's the part I still don't fully understand," Jenkins admitted. "She insists she didn't abandon the baby to die. She said she knew Star would protect her baby and attract attention. She claimed she planned to watch from a distance until someone found them, but panicked and fled when your car approached." Michael considered this, recalling the movement he'd glimpsed before discovering Star and Angel. She was still there, he realized, watching to make sure someone found them. Jenkins nodded. "That's her claim. She said she couldn't bear to walk away completely until she knew her baby was safe." The detective's professional detachment slipped momentarily. "In 15 years of police work, I've seen parents do unspeakable things to their children. This case, it's different. Wrong, yes. Criminal, arguably. But there's something else here, a desperation that makes me uncomfortable with how this is being handled." Before leaving, Jenkins confided that Sarah had asked repeatedly about both her baby and her dog. She wanted to know if they were still together. "When I told her you had temporary custody of both, she actually smiled for the first time since surrendering." The preliminary hearing attracted unprecedented public attention. The courthouse hallways filled with protesters holding opposing signs: justice for Angel versus support for Sarah. Michael, subpoenaed as a witness, arrived through a side entrance, having left Angel in Dr. Cohen's care at the hospital, with Star faithfully accompanying them. He caught his first full view of Sarah in the courtroom, thin and pale in county-issued clothes, her attorney whispering reassurances beside her. When called to testify, Michael recounted the discovery in medically precise terms, describing the dog's protective position, the baby's condition, and the life-saving interventions performed. The prosecutor, sensing a potentially sympathetic witness, limited his questions to factual matters. During cross-examination, Sarah's attorney took a different approach. "Dr. Thomas, in your medical opinion, was the infant left in a way that suggested the person wanted the baby to die?" Eleanor Matthews asked. Michael considered carefully. "No, the baby was wrapped in a blanket and left with a dog that was actively keeping her warm and protected. Had there been intent for harm, far simpler and more certain methods were available." The defense attorney nodded. "And this dog, Star, she exhibited extraordinary protective behavior, correct?" Michael described Star's refusal to leave the baby, her positioning to block wind and provide warmth, her alertness to threats. "In your experience as a physician, could the baby have survived the night without the dog's protection?" Matthews continued. Michael's answer was unequivocal: no. The temperature that night, combined with the infant's inability to regulate body heat, would have resulted in fatal hypothermia within hours without the dog's warmth and protection. As the hearing progressed, Sarah's attorney built a narrative of desperate circumstances rather than criminal intent. She introduced evidence of Sarah's eviction notice, terminated utilities, and medical records indicating symptoms of severe postpartum depression. The prosecution countered with arguments about available alternatives: hospitals, fire stations, police departments, all safe haven locations where Sarah could have legally surrendered her infant without fear of prosecution. The judge, a veteran jurist named Howard Simmons, listened impassively to both sides before ruling that sufficient evidence existed to proceed to trial, though he reduced the charges slightly. As bailiffs led Sarah away, her eyes briefly met Michael's across the courtroom. The look contained no accusation, only a quiet gratitude that left him unexpectedly moved. While the legal process advanced, public opinion grew increasingly divided. A social media campaign titled Stand With Sarah gained traction, sharing statistics about postpartum depression, economic hardship, and the inadequacy of social services for struggling mothers. Simultaneously, a counter-movement emphasized personal responsibility and the sanctity of child welfare. The polarization intensified when a wealthy couple, Richard and Diana Blackwood, made a public offer through their attorneys. They would provide Sarah Mitchell with the finest legal representation and establish a trust fund for her daughter if granted adoption rights for Angel upon case resolution. Their offer included a promise to maintain Star as the child's companion, complete with photographs of their estate's expansive grounds where the dog could roam. The Blackwoods' offer provoked immediate backlash, with commentators accusing them of attempting to purchase the child who wasn't legally available for adoption. The media circus took an unexpected turn when Richard Blackwood appeared unannounced at Michael's hospital during his shift. "Dr. Thomas," the businessman began with practiced charm, "I believe we can help each other." Michael, immediately uncomfortable, suggested they speak in a private consultation room rather than the busy corridor. Once alone, Blackwood dispensed with pleasantries. "My wife and I want that child. We can provide everything she could ever need or want. The best schools, worldwide travel, unlimited opportunities." His confidence suggested a man unaccustomed to refusal. "We understand you've developed an attachment, but surely you recognize that your temporary guardianship was never meant to be permanent." Michael maintained professional composure despite his rising indignation. "Mr. Blackwood, Angel, whose legal name is currently Jane Doe, is not available for private arrangement. Her mother retains parental rights pending court proceedings." Blackwood's expression hardened slightly. "Her mother abandoned her in an alley during a snowstorm. I'd say that forfeits any moral claim to parenthood." He reached into his jacket, extracting a business card. "Think about what's truly best for the child, Doctor. My offer extends to compensating you for your inconvenience. Call when you're ready to discuss specifics." Michael reported the encounter to Detective Jenkins, who was disturbed but unsurprised. The Blackwoods have been making waves since this story broke. They've hired private investigators, pressured officials, even approached Sarah's attorney directly. She sighed, adding, "Unfortunately, they've done nothing technically illegal. Ethically questionable, absolutely, but they're careful to frame everything as concern for the child's welfare." The detective's warning proved prophetic 3 days later, when Michael returned home from grocery shopping to find his apartment door slightly ajar. Star's warning growl greeted him from inside, heart pounding. He called emergency services before cautiously entering to find a shaken babysitter and an agitated Star standing guard over Angel's crib. According to the young woman, a maintenance worker had insisted on checking a reported water leak, but Star had prevented the man from approaching the nursery, growing increasingly aggressive until he hastily departed. Security camera footage later confirmed the visitor was not building staff but a private investigator on the Blackwoods' payroll. The attempted intrusion transformed Michael's perspective on his temporary guardianship. What had begun as a doctor's concern for maintaining a beneficial bond between infant and dog had evolved into something fiercely protective. "They're trying to take her," he told Dr. Cohen during an urgent meeting the following day. "Not through legal channels, but through manipulation, maybe even abduction." His colleague nodded gravely. "I've heard concerning rumors about the Blackwoods. They've tried similar approaches with other children, usually international adoptions that stalled. They view children as acquisitions." This revelation hardened Michael's resolve. He hired additional security for his apartment, installed advanced monitoring systems, and began bringing Angel and Star to the hospital during his shifts, arranging for trusted colleagues to supervise them in a secure staff area. The protective measures felt both necessary and surreal, a pediatrician essentially hiding a child from wealthy would-be adopters while her own mother awaited trial. Sarah's trial began 3 months after her surrender, by which time Angel had grown from a fragile newborn to a thriving infant with distinct preferences and emerging personality. Michael had established routines for her care that incorporated Star's constant companionship. The dog had become an essential part of Angel's development, her presence seemingly accelerating the baby's cognitive responses. During authorized visits, Sarah had observed this bond with bittersweet pride. Star was always special, she told Michael during one such meeting. When I found out I was pregnant, she would rest her head on my stomach for hours. It was like she knew before anyone. These supervised interactions gradually built a cautious rapport between Michael and Sarah, and their shared concern for Angel and Star, creating an unlikely connection that transcended their opposing roles in the legal proceedings. The courtroom fell silent as Sarah Mitchell took the stand in her own defense. Gone was the hollow-eyed woman from the booking photograph, replaced by someone still fragile but resolute. Under her attorney's careful questioning, Sarah described her downward spiral, losing her nursing position, the baby's father's abandonment, dwindling resources, and deepening depression. I loved my daughter from the moment I knew about her, she testified, voice steady despite the tears tracking down her cheeks. I worked multiple jobs throughout my pregnancy to prepare for her. I hand-painted her nursery even though I could barely afford rent. She described how her savings had depleted with medical bills and basic necessities, how assistance programs had long waiting lists, how family members had cut contact years earlier. When questioned about the night of abandonment, Sarah's composure momentarily broke. I hadn't eaten in 2 days. The heat was turned off. I couldn't stop crying, couldn't think clearly. I became convinced my daughter would die slowly of neglect if she stayed with me. The prosecutor's cross-examination was methodical and damning. Ms. Mitchell, are you aware that Massachusetts has a safe haven law allowing mothers to surrender newborns at hospitals without legal consequences? Sarah acknowledged awareness. And yet you chose to leave your infant outdoors in 17-degree weather? Sarah's response was barely audible. I wasn't thinking rationally. In my mind, I was giving her a better chance. The prosecutor pressed harder. A better chance than a warm hospital, than a staffed fire station. You expect this court to believe that leaving an infant in an alley with a dog was your best attempt at ensuring your child's safety? Sarah's attorney objected to the tone, but the damage was evident in jurors' expressions. As testimony concluded for the day, public sentiment seemed to be shifting against Sarah, with commentators noting the calculated nature of her actions and questioning whether postpartum depression could explain such elaborate abandonment. The trial's unexpected turning point came during Michael's testimony the following day. Asked by the prosecutor to describe the infant's condition when found, Michael provided clinical details before adding, unprompted, "What struck me most wasn't the medical presentation, but the intention behind how she was left. The infant wasn't hidden or discarded. She was positioned where she would likely be found, protected by a dog that had clearly been instructed to guard her." The prosecutor attempted to redirect, but Michael continued. "In my years of emergency medicine, I've seen truly abandoned infants in dumpsters, public restrooms, roadsides. This case was fundamentally different. The mother ensured her baby had protection, warmth, and visibility." When the prosecutor suggested Michael was speculating beyond his expertise, he responded with quiet authority. "I'm giving my professional assessment as the physician who found this child and has cared for her since. What I observed was not an attempt at infanticide, but a desperate, misguided effort to ensure survival." During cross-examination, Sarah's attorney built upon this narrative. "Dr. Thomas, in your temporary guardianship of both the infant and the dog, have you observed anything that suggests preparation or training?" Michael described Star's exceptional behavior, her responses to specific situations, her evident training. "This wasn't a random stray dog. Star is highly trained, well socialized, and completely focused on protecting the baby." That level of preparation contradicts the prosecution's portrayal of impulsive abandonment. As his testimony concluded, Michael found himself looking directly at Sarah, whose expression reflected both gratitude and shame. In that moment, the courtroom's adversarial structure seemed wholly inadequate for the complex human reality before them: a mother who had simultaneously abandoned and tried to protect her child, a doctor who had formed attachments to both the infant and her canine guardian, and society's conflicting demands for justice and mercy. The Blackwoods' growing obsession with acquiring Angel became increasingly dangerous as the trial progressed. Having failed in their direct approach to Michael, they employed more aggressive tactics. Their team of private investigators maintained constant surveillance of Michael's movements, documenting his schedule, identifying potential vulnerabilities in his security measures, and compiling information about everyone who interacted with Angel. Their wealth had purchased not only the best investigators but also a network of informants throughout Boston's service sector: doormen, delivery personnel, and even a hospital custodian who provided access to staff schedules. Detective Jenkins warned Michael about this escalation after an informant within the Blackwoods organization reported concerning conversations. "They're discussing what they call contingency extraction plans," she explained during an urgent meeting in Michael's office. "We don't have enough evidence for arrests or restraining orders, but I believe they're planning to take Angel by force if their legitimate efforts fail." Michael implemented additional security precautions, varying his routines and limiting public appearances with Angel. He installed a comprehensive security system in his apartment and arranged for trusted colleagues to provide coverage during his hospital shifts. Despite these measures, the inevitable breach occurred on a Tuesday afternoon when Michael had entrusted Angel to Jessica Winters, a nurse from the pediatric ward who had formed a bond with the infant. Jessica had taken Angel for what should have been a brief walk in the enclosed hospital garden, an area typically restricted to staff and patients. Security footage later revealed that a hospital volunteer recently hired and inadequately vetted had held a service door open, allowing access to two men posing as medical transport personnel. They approached Jessica with convincing credentials, claiming Dr. Thomas had arranged for Angel to receive specialized testing at another facility. When Jessica hesitated, requesting verification, one man moved to physically take Angel while the other blocked potential witnesses. What the Blackwoods' hired abductors hadn't anticipated was Star's presence. Michael had insisted the dog accompany Angel at all times, a precaution that now proved crucial. Star, who had been walking beside Jessica, transformed instantly from a calm companion to a ferocious protector. Her warning growl escalated to aggressive barking as she positioned herself between the men and Angel. When one abductor reached toward the infant, Star launched herself at him, her training evident in the precision of her attack, targeting his extended arm rather than more vulnerable areas. The man recoiled with a shout of pain as Star's teeth tore through his sleeve and into flesh. His partner produced a concealed weapon, not a firearm but a heavy telescoping baton. As hospital security responded to the commotion, the second man struck Star with brutal force, the impact producing an audible crack as the baton connected with the dog's ribcage. Despite the devastating blow, Star maintained her protective stance, blood now staining her tan and black fur. The abductors, realizing their opportunity was lost as security personnel converged on the scene, fled through the same service entrance they had used to gain access. Jessica, clutching Angel tightly, fell to her knees beside the injured dog. "Help her," she cried to the arriving security officers. "She saved us." Star had collapsed onto the garden path, her breathing labored, eyes remaining fixed on Angel despite her obvious pain. Emergency veterinary services were called immediately, and Michael, alerted during surgery, rushed to find his makeshift family in crisis. Star was transported to a nearby veterinary hospital, her condition classified as critical. The attack had broken multiple ribs, one of which had punctured her lung. Additional injuries included a fractured leg and internal bleeding requiring immediate surgical intervention. While veterinarians fought to save Star, police apprehended the would-be kidnappers attempting to leave the city. Their connection to the Blackwoods was quickly established through phone records and financial transactions. Richard and Diana Blackwood were arrested at their Beacon Hill mansion, charged with conspiracy to commit kidnapping, assault, and animal cruelty. Their attempt to use their wealth and influence to acquire Angel through criminal means shocked Boston society, where they had been respected philanthropists. The prosecutor handling Sarah's case found himself in the unexpected position of pursuing charges against both a mother who had abandoned her child and a wealthy couple who had attempted to steal that same child through violence. Michael maintained a vigil at the veterinary hospital, dividing his attention between updates on Star's surgery and Angel's care, now under heightened security at Boston Memorial. The emotional weight of almost losing both Star and Angel to violent abduction left him physically and emotionally exhausted. Dr. Cohen arrived to provide support, having arranged coverage for Michael's patients. Star saved her, Michael said simply, his voice rough from unshed tears. She knew exactly what was happening and didn't hesitate. Dr. Cohen nodded, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. Dogs like Star, working dogs with training, they understand protection as their purpose. She was doing exactly what she was meant to do. After hours of waiting, the veterinary surgeon emerged with guarded optimism. She's stable but critical. The next 48 hours will determine her recovery. She's young and was in excellent health before the injury, which works in her favor. While Michael contended with Star's life-threatening injuries, another tragedy unfolded in the courtroom. The judge had called an emergency session in light of the attempted kidnapping, recognizing that the case had escalated beyond typical child welfare concerns into matters of physical safety. The prosecution, seeing an opportunity to demonstrate the ongoing risks to Angel, shifted strategy. Rather than focusing solely on Sarah's actions on the night of abandonment, they now emphasized her inability to protect her daughter from determined predators like the Blackwoods. This case illustrates precisely why strict enforcement of child endangerment laws is necessary, the prosecutor argued. Ms. Mitchell's abandonment placed her daughter in a cascade of vulnerability that continues to threaten her safety. The state alone can ensure proper protection and placement. Sarah, hearing the argument that essentially portrayed her as the first link in a chain of endangerment, became visibly distressed. Her attorney tried to counter by highlighting that Sarah's choice of Star as protector had actually prevented the abduction, but the judge seemed unconvinced. As the emergency hearing concluded, he delivered an unexpected ruling. Given the extraordinary circumstances surrounding this case and the evident ongoing risks to the minor child, this court finds it necessary to expedite matters. The defendant's actions, regardless of intent or circumstances, demonstrated a fundamental failure of the parental duty of protection. While I acknowledge the mitigating factors presented by the defense, the law requires me to prioritize the child's safety above all other considerations. With those words, he sentenced Sarah Mitchell to 3 years in state prison for child endangerment and abandonment, denying the defense's request for probation or suspended sentence. The courtroom fell silent as officers moved to take Sarah into custody. Her attorney, visibly shocked by the harshness of the sentence, immediately announced an intention to appeal. Michael, who had returned from the veterinary hospital for the hearing, watched in disbelief as Sarah was led away in handcuffs. The woman's final glance back contained no anger toward him, only a desperate plea, "Please keep them together." The promise he nodded in response would prove far more complex to fulfill than either of them realized in that moment. As the tragedy of Sarah's imprisonment compounded the near loss of Star and established a new painful reality for all involved. Michael's life settled into a new rhythm during the months following Sarah's sentencing. Star had survived her injuries after multiple surgeries, though her recovery progressed slowly. The once agile shepherd now moved with a slight limp, her damaged lung capacity diminishing her stamina but not her vigilance over Angel. The apartment that had once seemed too large for a solitary occupant now felt perfectly sized for their unusual family unit. Angel was thriving despite the tumultuous circumstances of her early life, developing according to all standard milestones and forming a strong attachment to both Michael and Star. His temporary guardianship had been extended by the court pending resolution of Sarah's appeal, creating a state of uncertain permanence that Michael found increasingly comfortable despite his initial reservations. Every 2 weeks, Michael brought Angel to the women's correctional facility where Sarah was serving her sentence. These visits occurred in a special family room, modest accommodations made less institutional with donated toys and children's furniture. Sarah would hold Angel for the full hour permitted, singing softly to her daughter and telling stories about Star's puppyhood. Michael observed these interactions with mixed emotions, recognizing genuine maternal love while still grappling with Sarah's desperate choice on that winter night. After each visit, Sarah would ask detailed questions about Angel's development and Star's recovery, but absorbing Michael's answers with the attention of a medical professional rather than merely a concerned mother. During their 6th such visit, Sarah surprised Michael by asking an unexpected question. "Have you ever researched Angel's health background? Family medical history?" Michael admitted he hadn't pursued such information, assuming it would be included in future proceedings if Sarah's parental rights were permanently established or terminated. Sarah's expression grew troubled. "My adoption records were sealed, so I don't know my biological family's medical history. It always bothered me as a nurse, not being able to provide that information." Michael nodded understanding, familiar with the clinical importance of such knowledge. "I was always healthy," Sarah continued, "but I sometimes worried about what genetic surprises might be waiting." Something in her tone suggested this wasn't merely hypothetical concern. Michael studied her face more carefully, noting a yellowish tinge to her complexion that his clinical eye had initially attributed to the facility's poor lighting. "Sarah, are you feeling all right?" he asked, professional instinct surfacing. Her hesitation before answering confirmed his suspicion. "The prison doctor says I need more tests. I've been having pain and some symptoms." This conversation initiated a cascade of revelations. With Sarah's permission, Michael consulted with the prison's medical staff, discovering that blood tests had shown concerning liver enzyme levels. He arranged for a specialist to evaluate Sarah, using his professional connections to expedite what would otherwise have been a bureaucratic impossibility for an inmate. The diagnosis, when it came, was devastating, a rare genetic liver disorder that had remained dormant until triggered by the physical stress of pregnancy and childbirth. Without treatment specifically, a partial liver transplant, Sarah's prognosis was poor. The prison system was not equipped to provide such specialized care to inmates, creating a legal and ethical quandary that Michael brought to Sarah's attorney and Dr. Cohen for guidance. The situation became more urgent when Michael requested genetic testing for Angel to determine if she had inherited the same condition. The results confirmed their fears. Angel carried the same genetic marker. While currently asymptomatic, the condition would likely manifest in early childhood without preventive intervention. "She'll need a transplant eventually," the specialist explained during a conference call with Michael and Sarah's doctors. The ideal donor would be a blood relative with compatible tissue type. This medical necessity created a compelling argument for Sarah's compassionate release, a legal pathway that allowed inmates with terminal illnesses to serve their sentences under house arrest or medical supervision. Her attorney filed emergency motions, supported by affidavits from multiple specialists confirming both the diagnosis and the critical importance of genetic compatibility for Angel's future treatment. As these medical and legal developments unfolded, Michael confronted another revelation when completing Angel's medical documentation. A standard protocol required detailed personal information, including his blood type. Reviewing the forms before submission, Dr. Cohen noticed a discrepancy. "This can't be right," she said, pointing to his entry. "If your blood type is AB negative and Sarah's is O positive, you couldn't both be compatible transplant donors for Angel. The genetics don't work that way." Michael initially dismissed this as administrative error, but subsequent verification confirmed both blood types were correctly recorded. This scientific impossibility prompted Dr. Cohen to suggest a more comprehensive genetic analysis. "There must be a biological relationship we're not seeing," she theorized. "Otherwise, the compatibility patterns make no sense." The genetic counselor's office was unnervingly cheerful, its walls decorated with colorful chromosomal diagrams and family trees. Michael sat uncomfortably in a chair designed for expectant parents or anxious couples, not a doctor seeking answers to an impossible medical question. The counselor, Dr. Patel, reviewed the results of the expanded genetic test with professional detachment that gave way to genuine surprise. "This is quite extraordinary," she said, comparing charts on her computer screen. "According to these results, you and Sarah Mitchell share approximate 25% of identical genetic markers consistent with half-siblings." Michael stared at her in disbelief. "That's impossible. I have no sisters. I was an only child." Dr. Patel tilted her head thoughtfully. "Were you, though? Have you ever seen your original birth certificate?" Michael's parents had died in a car accident during his second year of medical school, leaving him alone to navigate adulthood without family guidance. He had never questioned his status as an only child. It was simply the reality he had always known. Following Dr. Patel's suggestion, he requested his original birth records from Vital Statistics. The document that arrived contained information he had never seen. His mother had delivered twins, a boy and a girl. The girl, named Catherine, had been placed for adoption immediately through a private arrangement. No further information was recorded about Catherine's placement, consistent with the closed adoption practices of that era. Michael sat in stunned silence at his kitchen table, Star resting her head on his knee, as though sensing his emotional turmoil. Could Sarah Mitchell be Catherine Thomas's twin sister separated at birth? Confirmation came through additional genetic testing that established beyond scientific doubt that Michael and Sarah were biological siblings. The revelation explained the nagging sense of familiarity he had experienced upon seeing Sarah's photograph and the inexplicable comfort he felt in her presence, despite their complicated circumstances. It explained their compatible tissue types with Angel and each other. Most importantly, it transformed the narrative completely. Sarah was not merely Angel's troubled mother or the woman who had abandoned her child. She was Michael's sister. Angel was his niece. And the random wrong turn that had led him to that snowy alley suddenly seemed like something more profound than coincidence. Sarah received the news during Michael's next visit, the correctional officer allowing them unusual privacy after witnessing their emotional reaction. "I always felt something was missing," Sarah confessed, tears streaming down her face. "Even before I knew I was adopted, I felt incomplete somehow." Michael nodded, experiencing the same revelation of an emptiness he had never been able to name. "We were together before we were born," he said quietly, "and then separated for 30 years until Angel brought us back together." The implications extended beyond emotional reunion. As biological relatives, Michael's petition for Angel's temporary custody gained new legal standing. More critically, his status as Sarah's brother made him an ideal liver donor for her treatment, a medical miracle disguised as scientific fact. The judge who had sentenced Sarah now faced an extraordinary situation, an inmate with a life-threatening condition whose brother had been randomly caring for her child, all three sharing a genetic disorder requiring familial tissue compatibility for treatment. The compassionate release hearing, originally scheduled for 30 minutes, extended to 3 hours as medical experts testified about the urgency of Sarah's condition and the future implications for Angel. "In my 30 years on the bench," Judge Simmons finally stated, "I have never encountered circumstances that so thoroughly demonstrate the inadequacy of our legal system to address the complexities of human life." With that philosophical observation, he granted Sarah's release into Michael's custody, ordering strict monitoring but acknowledging that keeping her imprisoned served neither justice nor her daughter's medical interests. Sarah's release from prison marked the beginning of a complex healing journey for the entire family. The court-mandated monitoring included an electronic ankle bracelet, weekly check-ins with a probation officer, and continued psychological counseling. Michael converted his home office into a second bedroom, creating a private space for his newly discovered sister while maintaining the nursery he had established for Angel. The apartment that had once felt so empty now hummed with life and purpose. Sarah's medical treatment began immediately, with Michael undergoing comprehensive evaluation as a potential liver donor. The procedure would be risky for both siblings, but preliminary testing confirmed their exceptional compatibility, a biological gift from the shared genetics that had remained hidden for 3 decades. Local media attempted to sensationalize this latest development in what they called the guardian angel story, but Detective Jenkins helped the family maintain privacy during this vulnerable transition. "You've all been through enough public scrutiny," she told them during a visit to help strengthen security measures at Michael's apartment. The Blackwoods criminal case had progressed to trial, their legal team attempting to portray the attempted kidnapping as a misunderstanding, motivated by concern for Angel's welfare. The jury remained unconvinced, returning guilty verdicts on all counts. The judge, citing the violence against Starr and the clear premeditation, imposed maximum sentences that ensured the couple would remain incarcerated until Angel reached adulthood. The financial penalties included substantial restitution for Starr's veterinary care and ongoing rehabilitation. Starr's recovery continued to exceed expectations, though the veterinary specialists warned she would never regain her former athletic abilities. The German Shepherd adapted to her limitations with remarkable resilience, modifying her protective behaviors to accommodate her reduced mobility. She developed an especially tender vigilance toward Sarah, often sleeping beside her bed during difficult nights when pain or anxiety overwhelmed the young woman. "She knows your family," Michael observed one evening, watching Starr divide her attention between Sarah and Angel. "Dogs understand pack structure. She's recognized that we're all connected." Sarah nodded, gently stroking the shepherd's scarred side. "Starr always knew things before I did. She knew about Angel before the pregnancy test. She knew you were safe that night in the alley. Maybe she knew we were siblings all along." The transplant surgery was scheduled for early spring, timed to allow Sarah's body to recover strength following her imprisonment. The weeks leading up to the procedure brought the siblings closer as they shared previously unknown family histories. Michael showed Sarah photographs of their parents, explaining their personalities and values. Sarah described her adoptive family loving but strict religious conservatives who had ultimately rejected her when she became pregnant outside of marriage. They discovered shared traits neither had recognized: identical expressions when concentrating, the same distinctive laugh, similar intellectual approaches to problem solving. "It's like finding pieces of a puzzle I didn't know was incomplete," Sarah confessed. Their growing bond provided emotional healing that complemented the physical treatments, creating a foundation of family support neither had experienced in adulthood. On the morning of the transplant, Dr. Cohen arrived at the hospital hours before her shift to support them. "I'm not your doctor today," she explained. "Just your friend." The surgical teams worked in adjacent operating rooms, removing a portion of Michael's healthy liver to transplant into Sarah. The procedures were lengthy but successful, the siblings awakening to the news that the initial results indicated positive outcomes for both. Recovery proved challenging, with Michael experiencing significant pain despite his physician's stoicism and Sarah battling complications from her pre-existing condition. Through it all, Angel remained their shared focus and motivation, the infant now approaching her first birthday seemingly unaware of the medical drama surrounding her future health. Summer brought healing to the household as both siblings regained strength. Sarah's legal status remained complicated, technically still serving her sentence under house arrest, but with increasing freedoms granted for Angel's care and her own medical needs. Her attorney continued working toward formal clemency, building a case around the extraordinary circumstances and Sarah's demonstrated commitment to rehabilitation. And the familial bond between Sarah and Michael provided the stability that courts typically sought in family reunification cases. During a home visit, the probation officer remarked on the transformation in Sarah. "When I first reviewed your case, I saw someone who had given up," she admitted. "Now I see someone with purpose and connection. This is what rehabilitation should look like." The first birthday party for Angel was a small affair, attended only by Dr. Cohen, Detective Jenkins, and a few hospital colleagues who had become extended family during the ordeal. Sarah had baked a cake decorated with stars, a tribute to both her daughter's canine protector and the new possibilities in their lives. Michael watched his sister and niece together, still marveling at the improbable sequence of events that had brought them to this moment. Later that evening, after Angel had been put to bed, Sarah approached Michael with hesitation unusual in their now comfortable relationship. "I've been thinking about something," she began. "About Angel's legal status and mine." Michael listened as she outlined her thoughts. "I want her to be secure legally, no matter what happens with my case. I was thinking, would you consider a formal adoption? Not to replace me, but as co-parent? So she'll always have you as her legal father, even if something happens with my appeal." The siblings researched family law options, discovering that second-parent adoption would allow Michael to become Angel's legal father while preserving Sarah's maternal rights. Their unusual circumstances required specialized legal assistance, but Dr. Cohen connected them with an experienced family law attorney who recognized the case's unique merits. The court date for the adoption hearing arrived on a crisp autumn day. Judge Eleanor Simmons, who had overseen Sarah's criminal case, specifically requested to preside over this proceeding as well. "I believe in seeing situations through to their conclusions," she explained during preliminary remarks. The hearing progressed with statements from character witnesses including Dr. Cohen, Detective Jenkins, and the probation officer who had supervised Sarah's house arrest. Even Star made an appearance, now officially certified as a therapy animal, her presence in the courtroom a powerful reminder of how the unusual family had formed. The court typically seeks to determine what arrangement serves the best interest of the child, Judge Simmons noted in her ruling. In this extraordinary case, the evidence overwhelmingly supports the conclusion that Angel Mitchell Thomas belongs with both her biological mother and her maternal uncle as legal co-parents. With the formal decree, Angel gained legal protection, and Michael gained formal recognition of the paternal role he had assumed from the night he discovered her in the snow. The judge added an unprecedented addendum, citing Star's extraordinary contribution to the welfare of the minor child. She included language specifically protecting the German Shepherd's place in the family unit. "Sometimes the law must acknowledge that family bonds transcend conventional definitions," she concluded. 5 years passed, transforming the tentative arrangements into permanent family bonds. Angel grew into a spirited kindergartner with her mother's artistic talent and her uncle-turned-father's analytical mind. Sarah completed her nursing recertification and began working part-time at a community clinic serving underprivileged mothers, her own experience informing a compassion that made her especially effective with patients in crisis. Michael continued his pediatric practice but reduced his hours to prioritize family life, something he had never imagined possible after losing Amanda. Their shared genetic condition remained a shadow over Angel's future, but regular monitoring showed no signs of liver dysfunction, the early intervention apparently preventing the aggressive progression that had threatened Sarah. Star, now gray-muzzled and profoundly arthritic, maintained her position as family guardian until her peaceful passing in her sleep one winter night, curled protectively near Angel's bed as always. The family buried her in a private ceremony beneath a maple tree in the yard of the small suburban home they had purchased together. Angel, understanding more than her parents expected, placed a hand-drawn picture on the fresh earth, a German Shepherd with wings, standing guard over a baby. "Stars watching from heaven now," she explained with a child's simple certainty. Sarah and Michael exchanged glances over their daughter's head, recognizing the profound truth in her innocent statement. Their family's guardian had indeed saved them all, not just on that desperate winter night, but through every day that followed, teaching them the meaning of protection, sacrifice, and unconditional love. In life's harshest winters, true guardianship takes many forms. Star, a wounded shepherd with her own painful past, taught us that protection isn't about strength alone, it's about unwavering presence. Sarah and Michael's journey reminds us that family transcends conventional boundaries sometimes found in the most unexpected circumstances. Like many of you who've weathered life's storms and made difficult choices to protect those you love, this story celebrates second chances and the courage to begin again when all seems lost. The deepest bonds often form through shared hardship, not perfect circumstances. As we age, we understand that redemption rarely follows a straight path. It comes through sacrifice, forgiveness, and the quiet heroism of showing up day after day. Remember that your own life story, with all its unexpected turns and hard-won wisdom, continues to influence those around you. Like Star's legacy with young Angel, your impact extends far beyond what you can see today. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.